She's4Sports is always excited to tell the stories of women in sports, those who are leading by example, those who are trailblazers, and those who are empowering girls, like my guest, Kia Nurse, who's doing all of that and more. Kia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So you're coming off of a huge championship win in Australia with the Canberra Capitals. Give us a sense of what that experience was like.
I absolutely loved my time in Australia. I loved the people, the food was normal, and they spoke English, so that was a big piece for me. Knowing that I was going to have to go overseas at some point in my sport just because of the way it works, I wanted to go to somewhere that was going to be comfortable for me, somewhere that was similar to home, and actually Australia is a lot more similar to Canada than it is to America, so it was really refreshing to see that, and they were great and I loved it, and hopefully it'll be another great experience for my second year overseas.
And for athletes, women in basketball, say specifically, how important is it to get that experience to go overseas? I know you've been to many countries, you've been to China. What does that do for not just your professional play, but for your personal kind of growth?
Well, it's always exciting to go and see different cultures and learn about them, understand why it works that way. And I think in an ever-evolving world that we live in, where you're going to run into people from different cultures no matter what you're doing, it's great for you to kind of be able to say, well, hey, I went to your country once, I loved this about your culture, and then you kind of break the ice and you're able to kind of have a conversation with somebody about it. And I think the more understanding we can become of cultures now, and especially in today's society, the better off we are. So it's great. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to travel the world and play the sport I love at the same time. And it's been a lot of fun to go to a lot of different places, but there's nothing like home.
I was going to say, load up your Instagram page, right? And you're coming also off of your rookie year in New York with the New York Liberty. Looking back at the season that took place, what are you most proud of?
It was a very different season for me. Obviously, being able to even play in the WNBA was a dream of mine for a long time. So just hearing your name called at the draft was something that was absolutely incredible. It was different because it was a down season. I'd been so successful with UConn the last 4 years that coming into New York and then only winning 7 games on a season was a little bit different. But it was great to kind of be in that experience, to be in the professional athlete world, to see how it works. Mm-hmm. In college, you're so structured. You know your schedule every single day. You go to practice, you go to class, you go do your homework. And in the athlete world, professional sport world, it's really be where you're supposed to be at the time you're supposed to be there, and then the rest of the day is up to you to kind of do whatever you want. So I loved being held accountable to be at practice or be at a workout or be at training, and then have the rest of the day to kind of just, if I needed to relax that day, relax. If I wanted to do something else outside the court, then absolutely explore the city, whatnot. So New York was absolutely incredible. I love it there. I'm so happy that I'm going back again. So it should be a lot of fun this year. Women's basketball, and even just the basketball program in general, has grown leaps and bounds. We're starting to see a lot of women, as referees. Obviously, Becky Hammond with the Spurs, Tamara Tatham with Raptors 905. How important is that representation that we're seeing now? I mean, it's huge. I think now organizations, especially, the NBA organizations, are paying attention to giving females the opportunity to be in those important roles and find ways where they can continue their passions in life, whether that be coaching, working in front offices. And I think for us, even as WNBA players, it's great to see Sue Bird working in the front office with Denver, or Christy Tolliver on the assistant coach bench with the Wizards, and seeing how we can continue to kind of use the connections that we've made within our league to continue to keep basketball in our lives and find ways to pursue careers outside of just playing. I think it's essentially huge for us to have a little girl see Becky Hammond doing what she's doing, coaching G League teams in the summer as a head coach. That allows them to say, hey, I can do that because she does it. And when we have that representation, it only continues to grow our game.
And obviously, as I said, there's so many positives with where basketball is going for women now, but also, that continued challenge with pay equity. You're starting to see it in different commercials now, and even companies who are, it's not a Nike all the time, or a company that's trying to sell you sportswear. It's, I saw a commercial the other day with Wealth Simple, and it showed two different, narratives. One was a young girl saying, I'm going to, play basketball, become pro, I'll make $40,000. And then the narrative for the boy was, I'm going to play pro basketball and make millions. Why there's such a huge disparity? What do you think the industry or the NBA needs to do to close that gap?
It's a complicated question. I think for us, we are an affiliate of the NBA, but it's
run very separate from each other. With the pay gap, it's such a large gap that it's not going to close very quickly. And realistically, for women to make millions of dollars, we have to generate more demand for our game. A lot of people get kind of misunderstandings around what happens on social media because it's so easy to kind of just read the 140 characters that you have but not really understand what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think people forget in the WNBA you have to have 4 years of education before you can even get drafted or be 22. So we're very educated people. We know if we don't make money, you can't pay us more money.
Yeah.
So a big part of what we're trying to do now is generate more demand for our game. Nobody can demand something that they can't see.
Well, I was going to say, because coverage is a huge one too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's the biggest thing with us right now. If people don't see WNBA games, they can't say, well, we want more of that. So first things first is we play a couple games on TV here and there throughout the season, but finding ways to get more, finding ways to get us on ESPN, big national networks, instead of just the WNBA app that we have that allows you to watch every single game. Another thing is sponsorships.
Yes.
So big money comes in from sponsorships that allows us to generate billboards, advertisements where people can see WNBA players and put a face to the name that they hear. And that's also something that's really important for us. So it's a big part of our CBA discussions right now and what the league is working with and what the union is working with, trying to allow us to create more money so that we can ask for a higher percentage of our CBA.
Because the WNBA opted out of the CBA. Yes. So that the conversations are still ongoing. And it's good to have voices like yourself and, you know, other players, like you said, they're very educated. They understand what the problem is, but they also are understanding of the solutions that need to be had. And, it, you know, when you talk to people at sports, you know, in general, people say it's a man's world and it's important to have women at the top. So it's good to see that these women, you know, are on the court, as I said, as referees, but also in the C-suite. They're in the boardrooms. They're the ones discussing these issues and trying to have that voice at the table in that conversation. You know, outside of all that you've achieved, because I feel like, I'm sure people tell you that you seem like someone who doesn't sleep. How do you?
I sleep a lot.
How do you kind of, you know, find time to really step back and say, yeah, I did that, and really appreciate it?
It's hard. I think right now I still don't have that kind of like, oh, I can just sit down and figure out what I've done. I'm a very big person on, oh, okay, I did this, but now what can I do to get past that? I think now I can sit back and watch an NCAA tournament in March and say, oh, I won 2 of those. And that's something that I can use for my whole life. I can tell my grandchildren about that. No one can take that away from me. And every single year, 12 to 15 girls get to do that. And I did it twice. So I think that was something that was absolutely incredible to think about. I didn't think I would accomplish so many goals by the age of 23.
That's what I was saying. I didn't want to call your age.
Yeah, no, 23 now.
Yeah, it's just like, when do you know find time to sort of step back and say, I did that, because you're kind of doing a lot, but very positive and good things. But I think as a person too, you still want to, you know, appreciate it. And
I think my mom does a good job of reminding me, like, that was big and you didn't really pay attention to that. But I think my family members have been really amazing, and we celebrate each other so much that sometimes I think it's like, oh, Darnell did such a great job at World Juniors and I won Pan Ams, but like, World Juniors is really fun. Like, you know, so I think sometimes we forget to think about how big what we did was. But my family is really good at reminding us that there's so many things to do. I think being an Olympian at the age of 20, it still hasn't hit me yet.
I was going to say.
And now I'm kind of like, okay, I went to the Olympics, that was amazing, but now I don't just want to be there. I want to come home with some hardware. And I think it's trying to revive your goals to make them a little bit bigger and continue to want to get farther.
You did look out for, you know, with Pan Am Games, you know, don't downplay that.
I can't downplay it now. It seemed to go well for me.
You talked a lot about your family. You know, how important is it to have that support system and that, you know, that camaraderie, and you guys seem like a very tight family. I know you've mentioned in articles that you're close with your dad.
Yeah, we are the most competitive family that you'll probably meet in your life. It's interesting to grow up in, but it was so much fun. Like, my brother being only a year older than me was incredible because we were able to kind of share in all of our experiences, and I could see what he did every day to make himself a better athlete. And then you had an older sister who was so good in her own sport, and I just wanted to be her. And she was the reason I started playing basketball. My mom and dad, they kind of had to get like split up because my brother was going one way and I was going the other. So my mom was like kind of the hockey mom, my dad was the basketball dad because he coached me. And I think they were absolutely incredible. I know it took a lot of time and effort and money to put us in those sports and allow us to kind of have those opportunities. So we're so grateful for them. They made sure that we were great athletes, but we were good people first, and we wouldn't be who we are without them. So it was a lot of fun being in that family. It's great to celebrate each other's success. But it's hard because we never get to be home all together at the same time.
Do you guys get to see each other? Like,
Never.
Do you know?
Like Christmas is somebody's always gone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my brother was here earlier playing Toronto, and that was the first time we were all kind of like in the same building for a while, and that's a lot of fun to be around. I think my mother goes crazy when we're all in the house at the same time, but
take a picture quickly.
That's crazy. But we have a lot of fun, and I love my family, and to have that support system and those role models was so important for me.
And speaking of family, I did talk to your cousin, Sarah Nurse, and she has a question for you. So I'm gonna, she said, because we know you're a huge Beyonce fan.
Yes, obviously.
Rank these Beyonce songs in your top order. Single Ladies, Love on Top, or Drunken Love? Drunken Love.
Drunken Love 1, Love on Top 2, Single Ladies 3, even though I know the whole dance to Single Ladies.
I was going to say the other day I was out somewhere and I actually requested that song. I'm not a single lady anymore, but I love that song. It's just that tune, that anthem. You have to play it, and if you don't...
My teammates are always like, all right, Kia, you're up. Put the song on.
Is that your walkouts? Is that your...
No, I just know the whole dance.
Oh, you just know the whole dance?
Yeah, I stood in front of the YouTube for a long time trying to figure out how to...
Yeah, and you just recorded it,
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a little shout out to Beyonce. You know, she's ever at a New York Liberty game. Maybe you guys can do a little rendition there. You know, switching to being a role model, I know you do a lot to make sure that young girls see you as an athlete, see somebody who's positive, who has good self-confidence. You know, tell us a little bit about why you decided to launch your elite basketball program for teenage girls.
It was something that me and my family had kind of talked about even before WNBA. We had seen Skylar Diggins had an elite program for herself. There's a couple others in the States, female basketball players, and we always said we could try and find a way to help the community. We could turn ourselves into one of these programs. And when I was younger, we were able to go play over in the AAU tournaments because my father had created a program called Blue Star. So he's very familiar with creating programs like this and running them and managing them. And essentially, we put him in charge of trying to find a way that we could make Kia Nurse Elite work. And he went out, he did a really good job. We talked to Nike, who I am a sponsored athlete with, so we work with them, and they backed it. So we get funding from them to work with them. They do our uniforms, they do our shoes, and it essentially allows young women to have the opportunity to go to the States, play in the EYBL circuit, which is Nike's circuit. So those are specific Nike tournaments that essentially only Nike teams get into, and then others kind of wild cards. So this is the only girls team in Canada that's able to do that. And it was very special to allow them to come and have opportunities to go and get themselves seen by coaches in the States in case they want to play there or whether they want to play in the CIS. So just a place where they can continue to get better. I think now sports, and youth sports especially, is becoming so much of a business that people are making it more expensive for kids to even have an opportunity to play. So this program is so that we can find ways that if there's kids who don't have enough money to play, we can get them an opportunity to come and play and use sponsorship money and find ways to allow them to have access to the sport.
And what are some of the barriers or pressures that young girls are facing that you've heard if you've gone to a speaking event and they come up to you after, or girls that you're mentoring? What are some of the pressures that they're facing trying to pursue basketball or sports in general, and facing some barriers, whether it's personal stuff, whether it's just the reality of, is this going to be a viable career path for me? Because sometimes I know I've heard from young girls, like they're telling their parents they want to play pro, and their parents are kind of like, well, why don't you do something else in school or pick something else? So what are you hearing sort of on the grounds with these young girls?
There's a little bit of everything. At UConn, I was very fortunate to work in a individualized major, which allowed me to kind of create my own major from certain specific disciplines, take classes, and then do a thesis. And my thesis was specifically based on why do young women drop out of sports at a higher rate than men, especially right when they're going to high school. So I was really fortunate to work with these great kids at a group of 15 eighth graders at a school in Hartford, Connecticut. And I went in 6-7 times during the semester. We did conversations about teamwork, leadership, all the things that come out of sports that are better than the wins and losses that'll help transfer themselves into life. And now what I've heard, working with them for so long, they were hilarious kids.
Sure, you had lots of stories.
Oh, they were great. I've heard a lot of things from, we just don't have the money to do it anymore. Coming from large families where there's a lot of kids, so how do you decipher which kid gets to play in an AAU program or gets to play on the road? There was a lot of things from just confidence level. I'm not confident in doing it. There's a lot of negative stereotypes around a girl who is an athlete or plays a sport. So do you want to be that kind of tomboy girl going into high school that isn't necessarily the most popular on now the social media realms because you don't look like the girls we see on social media? And that was another big one. I spoke to a young girl recently who had just come up to me and said, how do you deal with body image? Because not me. She was a stockier person because she was a great athlete. She ran track. She played pretty much everything. And she said, I stand taller than people. I have broad shoulders. So how did you deal with that growing up? And that kind of becomes an issue in it. As I look at Serena Williams, she's an absolutely incredible athlete. Powerhouse. She has the muscle. She has everything you need. And she is as successful as she is. She is a great mom. She got married. She has all the things that people are supposed to have. And I think, I told her, I said, you're not alone. Like, I'm not a model that you see on Instagram. I'm strong and I'm happy to be strong.
But you're your own person and you're fine the way you are. I think it's also showing that there's different models, there's different looks, and it's all fine. I think that you're right. The girls that are just looking at the Instagram saying they have to look like this one shape or whatever. There's so many different looks and stuff out there. But it's really about who you are, your essence, your talents, right?
Absolutely.
So I think you're a good person to showcase that. We definitely see the style of commercials that you do, and I think a lot of female athletes are showing the talent and this, being strong and being, impactful and energized, and not just, let's put somebody in a pink shirt and pink tights. It's not realistic, and it's just kind of, it skews with, the way young girls see athletes, So I think it's about getting that narrative right and, working with whoever your sponsors are to really just kind of be who you are, and really project that kind of person.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go back to basketball now. I mean, I know you're a huge, you're from Toronto, from Hamilton, I should say, but, Toronto native. What are your predictions for the Raptors going into the playoff season?
I like their team this year. I think they have a lot of talent. I think it's spread out well. And what I've learned from all the years that I've played is when you have a team that has more than one offensive weapon or two offensive weapons, it makes the defense have to guard the entire team. The bench comes in, they do a great job. I love Fred VanVleet's game. I think he comes in and he's an energy booster. He knocks down shots, and that stuff's important. But I never really knew how great Kawhi was on offense. Like, I've always heard of him as a defensive player, and I started watching their games. I was like, oh, he can do it on both ends. So that's exciting as well, and I think Lowry does a great job of being the engine that runs them, and they go as he goes. So I think they can make a deep run. I think they're doing well, hopefully for a championship this year.
Yeah, off the top of what you just said, I think that this is a team that we're seeing this season that really gelled and kind of came together. Everybody's trying to win. That's the goal. And it's good that Nick Nurse has different options to pull from the bench. But they just seem energized, exactly what you said. And sold out crowds. I think it's hard to get Raptors tickets these days. There was a time when, you could probably, get one up to the last minute and get good seats, I should say. But now even standing room only, like, you'll see it just packed, and it's exciting to see that type of competition and that engagement with fans from the city. I think, we were kind of begging for that for a while. And when other athletes and celebrities come here, I know that they love hanging out in the city, and they, everybody knows about the Raptors. You travel to the States, people know. You don't even have to wear a hat. They'll just ask you. So that's a lot of fun. So now that you're gearing up to enter your second season in the WNBA, what are some things that you're hoping to work on?
One of the big things is consistency. Going from a high-scoring game to kind of a low-scoring game is something that happens to me often. So finding ways to maintain consistency on offense and defense, and then work on my leadership. It's learning it from the vets that I have on my team in New York, but also I'm like a weird tweener because I'm like young, but I'm not really young. So in the national team, I got there when I was 16, now I'm 23, and they're like, oh, you're a veteran. But another girl on our team is 22, and she's the first year. So it's not really normal for me. So I kind of create a bridge gap where I've been there long enough where I can talk and understand what the vets are saying, but I can also kind of relate that to a younger player as well. And for me, it's always been trying to lead by example, which is why so many people say I'm intense all the time, and every possession counts, and every possession in practice, I'm very competitive, thanks to my family. So trying to understand that I can lead by example, but what are the other ways and how you can nitpick with each and every player individually, what makes them tick, what makes them go, what's good for them, and continuing to learn that so I can build my leadership for every team that I play for.
And what advice would you have for a rookie coming into the WNBA this coming season?
Just have fun. It's an absolute pleasure to play in that league. Every single night you're playing against the world's best players. And there'll be nights when it's your night, and there'll be nights when it's not your night. You'll have a welcome to the WNBA moment, whether that be in practice or in a game, but absolutely enjoy the moment. Enjoy being able to play in one of the most competitive leagues in the world. There's only 144 spots. So if you get one of those spots, absolutely cherish the moment, because it is probably one of the most fun seasons you'll play.
And you mentioned you love New York, so what's your favorite thing about being in New York?
There's a lot of things. I live on the outskirts, so it's kind of like Hamilton to Toronto, so that is like homey for me. But I'm really obsessed with Cold Stone, which is right around the corner from my house, and I'm also very obsessed with Magnolia's banana pudding.
I'm a dessert person, so I totally hear you.
And then Broadway, like Wicked, I could watch 50,000 times and be content.
And when you're away from Toronto, what do you miss about Toronto?
I miss my parents. Like, we have a great time together. Now I'm at the age where I'm like, okay, a week is good, and then let's take a break from each other and we'll come back next week. But I absolutely love being home and being able to see my friends that I haven't seen in a long time, being able to kind of just relax and chill. But Tim Hortons is always, I have one in New York down the street from my house, but it still doesn't taste the same. There's like something different about the hot chocolates. But I do always miss Tim Hortons and Harvey's.
And finally, because I don't remember if I asked you this earlier when you sat down, you know, you're obviously very talented and doing a lot of different things. And I know you launched your program for girls. You know, broadcasting, is that kind of the next natural step for you to showcase your the other talents that you have?
It's something that's always kind of come pretty easy to me. I've been fortunate to watch my brother and my dad and my uncle deal with the media when I was growing up, and they've been very good at it. So for some reason, it's like kind of a natural progression for me, and I'm excited to do the TSN March Madness stuff and be in there, talk basketball, talk the sport I love. I can learn a little bit while I'm watching film in there anyways. And I think it'll be a great way to kind of start that and see if it's something that I want to carry on through the outside of my life.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be fine. Everything that you've touched, you've just tackled and handled, and you know, it's great to see your star rising and the things that you're doing, especially on the court and off the court, to empower girls. I think that's definitely an area where a lot of people are starting to do a lot of research on to see, you know, what better ways can we get what girls still, you know, engaged in sports, whether it's a lack of resources, as you said, funding, or maybe it's, you know, providing programs for them to build their self-confidence. I think a lot of girls will benefit greatly from your program.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You know, we touched a little bit on social media earlier in our conversation, and I'm sure we could probably spend the rest of the evening talking about social media, but really, how do you deal with some of the trolls or the negative comments that you get, or just, you know, keeping a healthy, you know, taking a healthy approach to social media? I know sometimes people feel like they have to be on it all the time. So what's your perspective on that?
It's very interesting for me because I love social media just because I'm always away from home. So it's easy for me to kind of keep up with what's happening with my friends and whatnot. But I absolutely feel like sometimes I just want to shut it off or not have it at all. And for me, I know that as a female athlete, it's important for me to be able to be seen, for my followers to be able to see what's going on, for them to kind of follow it, because that's just a way to build your brand. So it's a healthy dose that you have to take of it. When there's people who are negative or just have no other reason but to be on your Instagram for fun, you either get blocked or you just don't respond. That's probably the easiest thing to do. You can always delete comments. You can't delete comments you put out, but for other people, it's just somebody who's behind a screen and bored and probably sitting at their TV watching something that makes them angry. So that's the way I look at it. I think right now in the world that we have, for me, I know I'm a role model, so it's important that what I put out is appropriate. I know there's so many young kids now on Instagram that's where I put out most of my, this is what I'm doing during the day, this is my pre-game routine. You can check out an interview that I did here. That's mainly what I use my Instagram for, or to keep people up to date with what I'm doing. My Snapchat is where I live my real life because that's just my friends and family. Yeah. I don't accept anybody that I don't know on Snapchat.
And you're still human, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still a 23-year-old kid who goes and has fun and wants to show people what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So that's literally my Snapchat life. There's really like 50 people on there that I actually trust to have it. But I use kind of Instagram and Twitter to allow people into my journey and what I do on a daily basis and how I got to where I got. I think the big part for young kids nowadays is that your likes, your comments, your retweets, your reposts, there's so many things you can do on social media.
I know, and every day something changes.
Yeah, they don't define your self-worth. And I think that's where people get caught up. If I don't have enough likes on this picture, then I'm not cool enough. It has nothing to do with it. Having a bunch of followers, let me tell you, does not change your life. It doesn't make any difference in it. But it can be a great thing or it can be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I think just not defining yourself based on the numbers that you get is a big, big thing that comes along with using social media.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. This was an awesome conversation, and I know our She's4Sports community is going to really enjoy what you had to say and really staying up to date with what's going on with you and learning about your initiative with young girls.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks.